running mate, former Vice President Mike Pence. He's now challenging him for the nomination. And of course, I began by asking him about Trump's indictment this week. Do you think if these allegations are true, he deserves to be convicted?
Well, first, moments like this, I think it's important for leaders in this country and those of us who aspire to leadership to return to first principles. The first principle is no one's above the law. The second principle is that every American is entitled to a presumption of innocence. Now, I've read the indictment in detail, and the allegations in the indictment are serious, and I can't defend what is alleged. But the former president deserves his day in court. He deserves the opportunity to make his defense in a court of law, and so I want to reserve judgment about this until he's had an opportunity to take his case into the courtroom and take his case to the American people. I will never diminish the importance of protecting our nation's secrets, particularly those that bear upon our national security. I have a son in the Marine Corps. I have a son-in-law in the United States Navy. We've got to ensure that classified materials, especially those that have been alleged in this indictment that bear upon our national security, are protected and secured. But that being said, we've gone through years, Chuck.
But during the 2016 campaign, you said what Hillary Clinton did with the server and the mishandling of classified documents in October of 2016. You said it disqualified her to be commander-in-chief. Does this disqualify Donald Trump to be commander-in-chief again?
Well, I stand by that view. It's one more example of a two-tier justice system that we've been living through for 7 years. I mean, I have to tell you, after seeing Hillary Clinton given a pass
by your Justice Department, it was by a Republican. No. Jeff Sessions had another U.S. attorney look into everything with the Clinton Foundation and didn't bring charges. This is a Republican. This was a Republican Justice Department.
In the run-up to the election, Chuck.
I understand that, but you guys looked at it again.
On history. Hillary Clinton was given a pass, and then we went 2.5 years through a Russia investigation that we now know from the Durham report should have never been begun.
Actually, there was an Inspector General report that said there was no politics involved with this, that everything was a legitimate reason to investigate. Again, these are all Republican appointees that have done this.
Chuck, the independent counsel found that the investigation into Russian collusion should never have been initiated. And yet we lived through 2.5 years of a constant barrage on your network, on the cable network associated with you, and many of the other mainstream media suggesting that there was Russian collusion. We had public officials that said there was evidence of collusion. Never happened. And then I thought it was disgraceful the way big media and big tech essentially colluded to suppress the story of the Hunter Biden laptop in the run-up to the 2020 campaign when the FBI actually had the laptop and knew it was legitimate. And so, look, it's hard for me to believe that politics didn't play some role in the unprecedented decision to bring an indictment against a former president of the United States. But I want to be clear.
I understand that you take it seriously.
No one's above the law, and the allegations are serious.
You believe there's all this politics that influenced this decision. What was the Justice Department supposed to do? Should they not have charged him because he's an active candidate for president? Even in the face of all of these serious allegations, should they not have brought charges?
Well, as I said in the run-up to this indictment, I had hoped that the Department of Justice would see its way clear to resolve this issue short of criminal charges.
Is that on the Justice Department or on the former president? I mean, he could have, he didn't respond to a subpoena. He didn't respond to requests. I mean, as Bill Barr said, he brought this on himself.
Chuck, I understand what's been reported in the news. We'll see what comes out in evidence in the court of law. But look, I want to say to you that I had hoped for several reasons that the Department of Justice would have done otherwise. Because it's, as we have seen in the last week, this has only served to further divide our divided politics. And I have to tell you, as someone that has represented the United States on the world stage, as someone who was on the International Relations Committee for 10 years, we're the gold standard of justice in the world. And to see a former president of the United States be subject to an indictment by the administration of the current president that he may well be facing again in the future, that sends a terrible message to the wider world, where there are many third world countries around the world where that pattern is very common.
Imagine deciding that you have evidence that a former president commits a crime and you don't charge. That could be just as damaging to our gold standard rule of law example, could it not?
I think the proper answer right now, because we have an indictment, and as I said, the allegations are serious, and the proper approach now is for equal treatment under the law. The Department of Justice, I would like to see bring equal vigor to the investigation into allegations around Hunter Biden. We have investigations swirling around Hunter Biden.
How do you know that they're not doing that right now?
Well, I want to see them come forward.
There's a U.S. attorney in Delaware that's been looking into this for quite some time.
That would reflect their commitment to equal treatment under the law. And frankly, the fact that that President Biden was found to have had classified documents dating all the way back, not just to his years as vice president, but to his years in the United States Senate, I would like to see the Department of Justice moving forward vigorously with that investigation.
He appointed a special counsel.
That's equal treatment under the law.
So you approve of what Garland did by having a special counsel look into the president?
Well, we'll see what happens, Chuck. I mean, the American people.
Give me your definition of equal treatment.
The American people have seen so far that the former president has been subject to an indictment.
There's a difference between equal treatment and equal outcome.
There is a perception.
Are you looking for an equal outcome or equal treatment? Do you get my point?
I get your point, and I think I'm being very clear on this. I think the American people would like to see evidence that we don't have a two-tiered system of justice. 7 years, it appears as though Democrats get one level of treatment, and Republicans, especially those of us in the Trump-Pence administration, get another.
But
and
Mr. Vice
the American people
want
to see action by the Department of Justice that proves to them, or starts to prove to them, that that's not the case.
Did the Sessions bar Justice Department politicize things in favor of the Democrats? Is that your allegation, that in 4 of the 7 years you're describing, that the Justice Department that was run by former Republican Senator Jeff Sessions, 2-time Republican Attorney General Bill Barr, was politicizing the Justice Department in favor of Democrats?
What I'm saying to you is that we now know that the Russia collusion investigation should have never been begun. 2.5 years put the country through.
Inspector General never said that.
In the days following that, under the Biden administration now, we've literally seen the Justice Department targeting parents going to school board meetings. We've seen the Justice Department targeting pro-life activists. And I have to tell you, Chuck, I'm still waiting for the rash of prosecutions of people involved in the BLM riots from the summer of 2020. I mean, where is the equal treatment under the law as evidence of the fact that people are being brought into court, being held for having caused billions of dollars in damage in hundreds of riots throughout the summer of 2020? Look, clearly the American people, or I would tell you among Republicans, vast majority of Republicans have lost confidence in the Department of Justice. And if I'm elected president of the United States, I've said on day one we're going to clean house at the highest levels of the Department of Justice,
and
we're going to find men and women of integrity who are respected on both sides of the aisle, who will restore confidence in the rule of law.
Christopher Wray is a Trump appointee. What makes him so a person that runs a politicized FBI? I mean, this is where I understand the accusation, but the facts don't feel like they fit the accusation.
All I'm telling you is the reality today. And I appreciate the service of everybody serving on the top floor of the Department of Justice, but they've lost the confidence of the majority of the American people.
You have been asked a few times whether you would pardon the former president if he's convicted, and if you were the president, would you?
Well, I just think the question is premature. I mean, honestly, Chuck, I've pardoned people who were found guilty of a crime.
What is your bar? What was your bar for a pardon?
Well, let me say first and foremost, I don't know why some of my competitors in the Republican primary presume the president will be found guilty. Look, all we know is what the president has been accused of in the indictment. We don't know what his defense is. We don't know if this will even go to trial. It could be subject to a motion to dismiss. We don't know what the verdict will be of the jury. We don't know the result of an appeal. So I think, look, the President of the United States takes an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And as I said in my announcement, I'll always choose the Constitution. But the oath the President takes also requires him to see that the laws are faithfully executed. That means respecting the Article III courts in this country. I think we need to let the courts do their job and let this case work its way through our judicial system. And if I have the great privilege of being President of the United States, as I did when I was a governor, we would evaluate any request for pardon for any American.
If you were President Biden, would you pardon him right now?
I just think this whole matter is incredibly divisive for the country. Look, I just think at the end of the day, it is saddening to me that we are now in this moment for two reasons. Number one is look, President Trump was my friend.
You said in past tense.
Well, we worked together very closely for 4 years. I'm incredibly proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. Some in this primary have taken to criticizing the record of our administration. And I'm proud of everything we accomplished for the American people. We left America stronger, more prosperous than ever before. Obviously, as you and I have talked in great detail, it did not end well. As I said in my announcement speech, the American people deserve to know that on that tragic day of January 6th, President Trump asked me to choose him over the Constitution. And I chose the Constitution, and I always will. I had no right to overturn the election.
Isn't this your way of saying he's not qualified to be president? Because he did not, because to put it in somebody else's words, I think it was Liz Cheney that says, you have to choose between the Constitution and supporting him. You chose the Constitution. Is that what he's demanding?
Well, look, President Trump was wrong then, he's wrong now. He's continued to say that I had the right to overturn the election. I had no right to overturn the election, and Kamala Harris will have no right to overturn the election when we beat her in 2024. I mean, look, the role of the Congress and the role of the vice president on that day is to open and count electoral votes, no more, no less. And I'll always believe, by God's grace, that I did my duty that day. But let me say, with regard to going forward, I'm running for president of the United States because I believe our party and our country need new leadership.
Running against Donald Trump, if he did not ask you to violate your oath, had he accepted the results of the election, and now he's running again without that, would you still be challenging him?
I would leave that to historians to speculate about, Chuck. I would tell you, at the end of the day, he did. And, and I always hoped he had come around on this. As I said recently, I hope.
Sounds like had he come around, you might not be running.
Look, no, let me explain to you. I always hoped he had come around on this issue.
Yeah.
Because I believe no one who puts himself over the Constitution should ever be president of the United States. And I had hoped that President Trump would eventually see that he'd been misled by the so-called legal experts that had advised him wrongly about the role that he thought I had and still thinks I had that day. But also, I would honestly tell you, Chuck, we have other differences other than that day. I spoke about it in my announcement speech. I mean, it's not just looking at the past, but it's the direction of the country, the direction of the Republican Party in the future. I mean, I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. But after leading the most pro-life administration in American history, and now my former running mate has taken to calling some pro-life bills at the state level too harsh, and he called the
6-week bill in Florida too harsh. You disagree with him?
I do.
Yeah.
But he also blamed electoral losses in 2022 on overturning Roe versus Wade. Look, I think that the cause of life is has been the animating force of the conservative movement in the Republican
What do you
Party
think
for 50
2022
years.
was about? Was it more about Donald Trump, or was it more about abortion?
Chuck, look, candidates that focused on the future, candidates that focused on the challenges facing the American people in 2022 did very well. Candidates that were focused on the past, were focused on relitigating the past, did not do well, even where we should have. But that's not the only differences on the right to life. Two other issues that I spoke about in my announcement. And I remember you saying a few weeks back that you always pay attention to announcement speeches.
I do.
Because you know that the candidate probably wrote every word.
I know it's the one
on
case.
this one.
That's right. I believe it.
Two other issues that I think bear upon the life of the nation are of great consequence, where the president and I have parted ways. Because look, in 2016, Donald Trump promised to govern as a conservative. And I'm proud to say that we did for 4 years under the Trump-Pence administration. But he makes no such promise today. Not only has he been walking away from a clear commitment to the right to life, but look, we have a national debt the size of our nation's economy. Joe Biden's policy is insolvency. He won't even talk about the 70% of the federal budget that represents entitlements that's driving that debt.
Does President Trump want to talk about it?
Donald Trump's position on the national debt is identical to Joe Biden's. And to me, the Republican Party has to be the party of growth and fiscal responsibility and reform. I think we owe it to those kids of mine and yours, to my granddaughters, to square our shoulders and be straight with the American people about the magnitude of this national debt.
I admire you on this issue, but you realize it's an unpopular issue. The reason, I mean, Donald Trump takes entitlements off the table because it attracted more voters in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Iowa.
Look, I get it. But I think the fact that Joe Biden came into office, spent $2 trillion in completely unnecessary spending, and ignited the worst inflation in 40 years, the American people are onto it, that as the government racks up debt, the cost of living is going up in this country. It's affecting their family budgets. And I think they're ready for a serious conversation that says, look, we can preserve and protect Social Security and Medicare for people that are in retirement and who will retire in the next 25 years. But for younger Americans, to turn us away from that debt crisis that they're facing, we've got to bring forward common sense and compassion.
You raise the retirement age for people
I think all these issues for younger Americans are on the table, including allowing younger Americans to invest a portion of their payroll tax in a personal savings account. I say take a New Deal program, make it a better deal, give them a better rate of return than they have in the government.
You realize
program.
the politics of this has never worked. Every time someone's proposed, whether it was George W. Bush, I'm just saying, why do you think the public's ready this time to listen on this?
Well, I think it's because they know the country's in a lot of trouble. We have a debt the size of our nation's economy for the first time since World War II. And inflation's gone up 16% in the last 2.5 years. It's crushing the family budgets of millions of Americans, 2/3 of which are living paycheck to paycheck. They're starting, in my judgment, to understand that as government racks up debt, their inflation is happening and it's crushing the purchasing power of Americans. So you've got to reform it. Last issue, though, where there's a difference, Chuck, if I may. And that's about America's place in the world. Look, I think America's the leader of the free world. We're the arsenal of democracy. Under our administration, we made the largest increase in investment in our national defense in 40 years. And then we unleashed the American military to take down the ISIS caliphate, take down the world's most dangerous terrorists. We even confronted the Russians in Syria, took out 100 Russian soldiers without one American casualty. And Russia never even attempted to redraw international lines by force during our administration. We did peace through strength. Now, my former running mate, seeing war raging in Eastern Europe, is signaling an ambiguous message, not even able to say who he would prefer to see win the war in Ukraine. Well, I think the United States needs to stand by the courageous fighters in Ukraine, give them the resources more quickly than Joe Biden has, to take the fight to the Russians and repel this invasion.
What do you tell your former colleagues in the House Republican Conference who don't share this view?
Well, look, I respectfully disagree. Ronald Reagan in 1985 coined what came to be known as the Reagan Doctrine. That was, if you're willing to fight the communists in your country, we'll give you the tools to fight them there so we don't have to fight them here. I mean, Joe Biden has done such a terrible job explaining the importance of repelling the Russian invasion and supporting the military of Ukraine. And he's been delivering the equipment slowly. He promised 33 Abrams tanks in January. They're still not there yet. And they're continuing to drag their feet on aircraft. But look, our national interest there.
It's half your party that doesn't want, that it doesn't even want what he's been sending over.
Yeah, well, it's number one, it's not half. And number two,
the House Republicans.
Look, I think the skepticism about support for the military in Ukraine is more a reflection of a lack of confidence in Joe Biden as commander-in-chief than it is any other issue.
What this is going to take, Trump out there also fueling
what this is going to take is leadership, having a president that says to the American people, look, it is in our national interest to see the Russian military repelled from Ukraine. Not for, Joe Biden talks about glossy goals of democracy. No.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if Russia overruns Ukraine, I predict you it would not be too long before the Russian army crossed the border where our men and women in uniform would have to go and fight.
Poland. By
crossing into a NATO ally. Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Chuck. And I also believe that by giving Ukraine the ability to repel the Russian invasion, we will send a deafening message to China that the wider world will not tolerate them using force to redraw international lines in Taiwan or anywhere in the Asia-Pacific.
For the sake of the campaign, do Americans deserve a verdict in Trump's case before the polls, before the election?
Well, I expect they'll get it.
You'd like to see this trial take place before the election, that the American public should know before the election whether these allegations are true in a court of law.
Well, look, I think the president should have the right to bring his defense in a court of law.
And it should be speedy?
And if he's found to be guilty, have every right, as every American does, to pursue an appeal and resolve the issue.
You think it's a mistake to delay this trial after the election?
I also believe the American people would be greatly heartened, given the controversy, the evidence that's come out publicly, the Hunter Biden laptop, all the allegations, even news that broke in the last few weeks. The American people would be heartened to see the Department of Justice move against Hunter Biden, move against the accusations against the Biden family, and continue to pursue just as aggressively an investigation into President Biden's mishandling of classified documents. We've got to restore confidence in the rule of law.
I want to talk a little bit more about your campaign, which I'm sure you'll be pleased about, and a little less about Donald Trump's legal issues. Who is a Pence supporter, and how does it differentiate right now from a Trump supporter? If you are the Republican nominee, it means you're going to win over Trump supporters at some point. But right now, they're not for you. How do you convince them? Because he's angry at you, they're angry at you.
Well, look, I think that that people around the country, as I've traveled the last 2 years, have in the main, very humbling views about me and my family. I mean, I've been stopped in airports and grocery stores and gas stations by Americans of every political persuasion who thanked me for my service to the country.
How many of them were wearing MAGA hats when they
and particularly thanked me for the stand that I took on that tragic day.
But are people that wear MAGA hats doing that to you?
I know the people in our movement, and I can honestly tell you that they're some of the best people in this country. They love America, and they love our Constitution. And I have every confidence as we carry our campaign forward, and we articulate not only the way we kept faith with the Constitution on one day, but our determination to lead our party on that broad conservative agenda that's delivered not just great victories for the Republican Party, but for the American people over the last 50 years. I have every confidence that this party will come together after a good and vigorous primary and we'll deliver a great victory in 2024.
You confident that if Donald Trump does not have the most delegates, that he will concede the Republican nomination?
I am confident that Republican primary voters are going to sort all this out in the months ahead.
And will he accept defeat?
You
saw him once not accept defeat. Do you believe he will accept defeat in this primary if he does not have the most delegates?
I understand your preoccupation with my former running mate and
He's
what
the
he
front
will
runner.
do or
It's not a
won't do or
preoccupation. I have
may
no
do.
choice.
Chuck, look, Republican primary voters know the stakes in this election. They know that we've not just got to win, but we've got to steer our country back to the things that have made America strong and prosperous and free. I'm confident they're going to choose a standard bearer that will hold up those conservative values. And I believe in all of my heart that I'll be that nominee and will lead our party and, more importantly, our country to a great victory in 2024.